Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome. And we are delighted that you're here. I'm Kim Serafini, the founder, creator, and CEO of Positive Prime Technology. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by my co-host, Benny Wallington, who will take it away in a moment. But in the meantime, I'm just going to tell you that I feel blessed for you and for me, or for us, because we get to have a gorgeous conversation with Susi Vine. I've gotten to know Susie a little bit over the last couple of months, and what's beautiful about developing relationships is when you're actually surprised just a little bit more, and surprised just a little bit more, and surprised just a little bit more. And that's been my experience with Susie. So if you will lean in, you'll get a little bit of a taste of who she is and what she's up to in this world and why. But much more importantly, I want to invite you to follow Susie and perhaps go through your own experience that's exquisite, where you're just gently nudged and surprised by who she is as you allow her to unveil, unfold, or emerge for you as somebody who guides and supports and encourages and educates and so forth. So anyway, take it away, Benny.
Thanks, Kim. I love the theatrical introduction as well. But that was really awesome because that's a great introduction for me to Susie as well. What a beautiful way to introduce someone. I'm going to do the more formal one, but still awesome. So Susi Vine is on a mission to restore the balance of health and happiness in our world. That's why she's talking with us at Positive Prime, right? Where the scales have tipped to burnout, anxiety, and chronic disease. As the host of Happyfied podcast, she spotlights healthy living and lifestyle experts and shares tools to help her audience live with maximum resilience. Susie's programs help high achievers discover how happiness paves the way to greater success by flipping the script on stress and burnout and anxiety and chronic disease, like I said before. With more than 20 years of experience practicing positivity and uplifting others, Susie now inspires an audience around the world to live life with less stress and more flow. Love flow, helping her clients to discover how they can unlock optimal performance, focus, and greater success by making space for what lights them up. Awesome. I'm excited, definitely excited. And Susie is also the recent author of the Positive Prime session, Your Thriving Life, which we've all just checked out. It's just gone live on the website. You can check it out if you're on the Positive Prime platform. So after that introduction, I know you focus, Susie, a lot, well, welcome. And I know you focus a lot on guiding people out of burnout. And I also know that the first experience that you had with this was in the home. So if you want to start there, that might be really interesting for our audience, because when I was thinking about this, it's probably the first place a lot of us saw it growing up, but we probably didn't realize at the time. So take it away, Susie, as Kim would say.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, joined by you both. Yes, I think we don't often recognize how that influence shapes us and the way that we respond to stress. It's just, nature versus nurture. There's always that question in terms of how we become adults and present in the world. My mom was a nurse. She worked nights for 40 years, and she, went above and beyond in every capacity as a mother, as a nurse, as a wife. She pushed herself to the limit, really. And so I saw, and I was aware, stress was kind of becoming a buzzword through the 80s and the 90s. I could see the impact on her health. And certainly, as I've been an adult, when I was a kid, she said, when you grow up, do anything you want, but if you go into medicine, I'll disown you. So I went into theater, hence the theatrics. But over that time, I also saw the way that her health was impacted. So not only the way that she carried stress, that kind of showed up in relationships, but also the impact in her own health. And then through later work that I did, that influence came back to me. So I've kind of gone a winding path, but it kept bringing home to me how important it is that we pay attention to it, because it shows up in everybody's lives, but we don't always really acknowledge the impact.
Yeah, that's
what's fascinating about that. Sorry, Benny, is that
that's all right. Jump in.
Because I've been exposed to your work, Susie, and my own personal journey over the last couple of years, I've been diving deeper for the listeners or the viewers, they may not know that I actually have a cardiac pacemaker implanted into my chest, and that was about a year ago, after 2 extraordinary years where I had 6 cardiac arrests and near-death experiences, or unconscious episodes. And until they put a little chip into my chest, the specialist didn't know exactly what was happening, but then they started to view that my heart would literally flatline, and for extensive periods of time. And when you don't have perfusion, because your heart is not pumping, and you go beyond 10 seconds, you're clinically dead, and things start to go really wrong because you don't have oxygenated nutrient-rich blood. No blood's flowing around to your brain or to the rest of the organs and systems in your body. Why is this important? Well, I would have been the last person on the planet who would have believed that perhaps my body, and in particular my autonomic nervous system and my vagus nerve, was impacted by decades of me being ambitious and driven. And I never linked the two to being stressed or in overwhelm. But clearly, it's shown up in my body. And whilst the specialists won't tell me there's a causative effect, I find it very difficult to believe that I didn't do this to myself. The good news is I also think that I can do to myself radical, wholesome healing. And Susie, that's really your gift to the world, is that you're guiding people who might be like me in denial and yet actually have some of the signs or symptoms showing up. It's important, though, that we have practical and relevant ways to guide ourselves and each other out or through the maze. Let's talk about like the top 5 things that you would say to somebody who, if you could recognize in them, they are in overwhelm. And then for all of the viewers and listeners, let's give them some clues that they can look for to determine whether they are actually in overwhelm, even though they won't acknowledge it or accept it or be aware of it.
Right. Well, and I think, here in the States, I don't know if this is a phrase where you are, but work is a 4-letter word, right? We figure that stress is part of it. We think that it's just, we can't expect more than to have to carry that at work. And what I see, and a connection that I think a lot of people miss out on, is that when we are stressed at work, which is often a big cause of it. Life serves up situations. And so stress can happen in our personal lives and emotionally too, of course. But that consistent impact of stress, we can't express that fully at work, right? We've got that professional persona. Where we start to give a little bit, where it starts to show up, is in those personal relationships with the people that we love the most, because that's where we feel safe and can express ourselves. So one kind of indicator is if you're struggling in your personal relationships, if you are more emotional or irritable, you're not communicating as well, you don't feel heard, you're not hearing what other people are saying, that could be indicating that that stress is showing up here where you have space for it. And it's, coming from other sources. So the impact in relationships is one. Sleep is the most common complaint that I hear from people, that busy mind, which is kind of that there are so many cases in which stress exacerbates a physical situation, which triggers our stress. But when our mind is so busy and it interrupts our sleep, we can't file the thoughts and have that fresh slate for the next day. So that tends to start escalating things. So there's a lot of ways in which I try to help people find a way to pause the cycle and take a break. Recognizing where we are with our breath is so important. A really, really powerful intervention for when the anxiety is ratcheting up. But just in normal cases of stress, if we look for a way to pause, to remove ourselves, to tune into our breath, it's so powerful, because we get into that reactive mode, right? That biological stress response, and we are fully engaged. And when we just even remove ourselves in terms of, how am I breathing right now? Am I really breathing to my fullest extent? That brings us out of that stress response, and we can start to bring our other, tools back into play. So breathing and tuning in, engaging the senses is one of the things that I share a lot, really bringing those back to front and using that pause to get curious. Curiosity and that spirit of play is something that I really love to bring value back to. As I'm working with clients, they think I don't have time for play. I've got to work now. I've got to get that success, reach those goals. I'll have time for play to restore my relationships later. And I love helping them see that we can actually turn that around and have a lot more fun en route to the goal. So those are a couple of the keynotes: sleep, that emotional irritability, seeing that show up, and then physical tension and physical issues as well. Cardiovascular disease is one that's always been closely related to stress. Always is a big word, but for a long time. But now we're starting to recognize that even diseases like type 2 diabetes, where the conversation was only about what are you eating and are you moving your body, stress is a really big factor in that starting to develop. So those other issues that the doctor might not be bringing the conversation to, how is your stress level? That's a place where I really like to take a look and engage and start to bring the benefit of these practices like mindfulness and breath work and that sort of thing.
Awesome. I love that. In my role as a performance coach, I always start with the breath and sleep routines. Kind of the low-hanging fruit for most people. And most people aren't aware that they're so crucial, and they don't have breath work or sleep routines. It's just like, just something that they feel like it just occurs for them. So as someone who might not be aware of those things, what are some of the key indicators that you see in people when that kind of light bulb moment, oh, I've really got to do something? Because often, as we know, it takes burnout for people to actually start to do something about things, and that's a long way to come back from, rather than catching things early.
Exactly. And so that's why I like to bring attention to how are you doing in your relationships? One of the things that I see people tend to do is, instead of reaching out and engaging in their social group when they're stressed out, when they need the support, they tend to withdraw because they don't want to bring other people down or that sort of thing. And so I always bring the conversation to, are you feeling connected? Do you have the people that you can talk with beyond our sessions to feel heard? And I highlight the fact that, when we open up that conversation to share, to ask for support, we can give support, and that starts that flow too, right? That the benefit that we get from giving to other people. And so highlighting where their social relationships are and taking a look at that can be really powerful. I like to look at the broader picture. I like to look at where we end up in terms of the chronic diseases that can take root arising from stress. There's other factors, like we've already talked about, the way that we eat, the way that we sleep, but stress is kind of the common denominator. We all have it. It's just a question of how we show up to it. And like we've already mentioned, how we've seen the people in our lives model that it should be received. And so sometimes just flipping the switch and helping people realize that stress doesn't have to be threatening or debilitating, but that they can see it as an opportunity as they start to make that shift. Awareness and then habits kind of also go in tandem. Sometimes when you shift awareness, it's a little easier to build those habits of, taking a few minutes to tune into your breath or to bring in mindfulness. When you see the benefit of that, it's a little easier to come back to it.
I love that, Susie. I'd love to ask you, because I was fascinated by a TED Talk that I watched not so long ago by Kelly McGonigal. That's McGonigal, and it's called How to Make Stress Your Friend. No doubt you came across this TED Talk, and indeed the research that underpins it, and her work in the world. And it was indeed a light bulb moment for me as well, because I could reframe stress and make it my friend, right? I also love Dr. Alia Crumb's TED Talk, which is effectively about the placebo effect and how we perceive things. And so what I'd love to hear is, how do you guide people in making stress a friend? Because there's good stress and there's bad stress, and you can actually reposition bad stress such that you experience it as healthy, beneficial stress.
Exactly. I loved, yeah, Kelly McGonigal's TED Talk was definitely one of those light bulb moments for me. Also reading about Sean Akers' research with Harvard students, where they were shown videos with the same symptoms of stress, but framed differently, framed as beneficial or framed as detrimental, and then put in a stressful situation, they were seen immediately to have very different physical effects. And so that's what I really love to turn the light bulb onto for people is, you know, we have control over our biology. If we pay attention to the way that we're breathing, we can slow our heart rate down. If we recognize that we don't have to be feeling threatened by stress, our heart responds differently. And it's so empowering. And that really is my ultimate mission, is to help people feel that they have the power to make, even if it feels like a tiny shift to begin with, because those tiny shifts create the capacity and the belief that we can make bigger shifts in different areas as we move forward. But we have to start small. I think so many people are waiting for the big solution, the radical shift. They're waiting for the right time and the right guide, and they feel stuck and overwhelmed. And then it's not likely to stick anyway, because it's such a drastic change. So that light bulb moment, you know, we can look at the same symptoms. The heart starts to speed up, the breathing is shallow, the palms are sweaty, right? Like the standing in front of the class flashback we can all conjure, I'm sure. As our body being primed to respond, that's so empowering. We're ready for anything. Our focus is optimized. And when they start to see that, you know, it might take a little while. Those are the kinds of things, you know, flipping the switch and changing the perception is one thing, but having that available when you're in stress and not falling back into the pattern is a different story. So working in conjunction with sharing those insights, the fact that our biology can be our friend. It doesn't have to be in opposition to what we think we want to create. And then coming back to those practices like breathing in the moment, pausing and getting curious, instead of following that habit that we have of responding immediately. And, you know, whatever's coming out of our mouth is not usually ideal, right? Or the emotion that might be triggered that starts to lead the whole situation off the rails. And so those little steps, I like to encourage people to start practicing in less stressful situations so that they've got it available. They're more used to drawing on that tool, so that when it really comes up to it, it's a conversation in a meeting and they don't want to lose their temper or their presence and really stay calm. It's easier because they've been drawing on it. So we have to look for ways where we can implement that. I like to suggest like driving, right? Because we all are driving in the car. We can do whatever we want in the car, maybe singing along with the radio. But a lot of people say to me, you know, I don't reveal my temper very often, but when I'm in the car, that's when I really notice that I get angry or reactive. So it's a good place to start building that habit.
Oh, I love that. Don't you, Benny? We love building habits that serve us in times where we're giving ourselves the opportunity to develop the emotional muscles and the muscle memory. So the emotional muscle memory. Interestingly enough, Susie, I, of course, want to dive into the fact that you have a Positive Prime session and you've been through the Positive Prime certification. And you're a fan. We've actually done Shazad's Stanford course on positive intelligence together. So that is actually, in case the listeners are wondering, how is it that Kim got to know Susie just a whole heap better over the last couple of months? That'd be it. You know, what's interesting to me about what Benny was saying was that because I've revealed a little bit about the conditions that I've been through physiologically, I'm not sure that all the listeners or the viewers know that I actually am the woman who is responsible for stone massage in spas. Like I invented under a brand named Lithos Therapy and trained thousands of therapists and set up distributorships in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East and India and so forth and so forth. And what's interesting is that just recently, a neurologist and I were having this conversation about perhaps my condition I was born with. It falls into the same category as multiple sclerosis or MND, motor neurons disease, which is, I think, in the United States called ALS. The reality is that I may have actually been active in the spa industry, having so much massage, doing so much meditation, having so many spiritual experiences with so many different healers and therapists all over the world, that I arrested the development that then led to only 2 years ago having these very dramatic unconscious episodes. And it made me realize that, you know, right now, I undoubtedly spend much more money and time and energy on repairing and loving my body. Like I have a personal fitness coach every single day, 5 days a week, and I do a really intense 1 hour session. I would never have justified that 10 or 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And yet it's not negotiable for me now. And to Benny's point, often we get to crisis before we do something. What is it that you know now about neuroscience and positive psychology that helps people to understand, because it's been really helpful for me, that it's not my fault that I didn't pay attention to prevention as well as I'm paying attention to healing?
Yeah, that's so true. And I like to say too, you know, we think it isn't broken enough. I don't need to fix it. I can power through. And that was something that I saw when I was working with my senior clients. And that's the work that I was doing immediately before I made this last pivot to focus on holistic health and to bring the conversation to stress and the awareness to the fact that we have so much power over our health. We've just been giving it away or putting it aside or not wanting to take it on because it feels complicated. And when I got that up close and personal perspective, as I was working with clients in their 80s and 90s, and they were moving because perhaps they had lost a spouse or lung disease, heart disease. I mean, the list goes on, dementia, having to move one partner into memory care and the other one down the hall so that they weren't across town from each other, but they couldn't take care of each other anymore, right? The heartbreak of that. Years down the road, it isn't broken enough. I don't need to fix it until it's broken. And then that course correction is so overwhelming. It's so hard. At that point, you know, what, you know, options do we have, right? Maybe life, you know, diet or a radical transformation like I was talking about, and usually medical intervention. So what is it about us that makes us think I don't have time for it? And I think that another one of those light bulb moments is, as I was preparing a presentation, I've been talking with corporate teams about burnout and really bringing a light to, as Sean Aker puts it, the happiness advantage, right? Society has taught us we need to focus on goals now. And then when we get those goals, those benchmarks, then we can be happy. Then we can take more time to put to our health or to restore our relationships. And now that we can see the evidence, we can validate that putting happiness first makes everything easier. It improves our health. Our social relationships are stronger and we're more engaged. All of that data that I know that you already know so well, that's maybe the permission. That's when I start to see people say, okay, maybe you're onto something. Maybe this time that I'm putting towards myself is okay. Right? It's a big step for them. And I think that below that is the situation of worthiness. We have to prove that we're worthy by reaching success or goals. We have to prove that we're worthy, you know, being a successful person so that we can have the quality relationships or be the parent that our kids are going to look up to, rather than recognizing that when we put ourselves first, when we have that time to play and be restored, we bring so much more to the table. That playtime benefits us and it benefits our family too. You know, that's the kind of momentum that's really beneficial. But that permission, that worthiness, it's really interesting to start rolling that back and looking at how we can take that permission back. I feel like society has given us a model that's broken. And so it now feels like revolutionary to shift it, to put that aside and say, I'm going to focus on me first, even, you know, to the point of helping the kids understand this is my time and I'll be available to you in a little bit, right? I think it's a powerful model for our next generation. Actually, I think it's one of the best gifts that we can give to them.
I love that. Benny is a little younger than us, Susie, and working with him is beautiful, but he also has, and for those of you who have not yet watched any of Benny's coaching pearls, I would recommend that you do so. He also does a wild free dance that inspires me, actually. He doesn't know, maybe he doesn't know just how much it does inspire me to be seaweed. My point is that I think that this younger generation may have actually come into this world with the downloads in their DNA for more play. What do you think about that, Benny?
Ooh, juicy as super juicy topic. I actually think that we all came into this world with the downloads for play, which is representative of when we were children. And that was actually when we were in our highest flow states. And unfortunately, the way the Western world has education systems built to basically rip that from us and get us to do this and then that and then this, and then you're right, you're wrong. If you're wrong, you're no good, et cetera, et cetera. And our creative flair gets pulled away from us. And so that's why Susie's work is super important, because it's I'll almost go ahead and say it's more important than breath work and sleep, but it's not. But once you've got those two down, play is so crucial. And it's not, and like you're saying, how can you build it into being an adult that's adult, right? And one of my clients, I was asking him, like, what do you do, mate? Like, what did you do as a kid? He's like, I love Legos. I had so many Legos. So what we got him to do is he was reconnecting with his twin daughters, who are amazing, smart, sporty, like just awesome. Start building stuff with them. So he built a whole deck with them on weekends. And he got that kinesthetic Lego vibe back, that frothiness. And so that's play. That's play. Building stuff is play. So anchoring back into what you did as a child is so crucial. And playing outside. So I've been through burnout twice. Well, once, 1.5, we'll call it. First time in London, working for a tech company, way too many hours across multiple. I was working on 3 time zones, sort of 16 hours a day, and I just flipped it and lost it, and which was completely out of my character. And they basically threw a bunch of cash at me, sent me on a holiday, and then when I came back, I still quit. And I think that's what the corporate sort of space will do for people. They won't recognize, and then they'll throw everything they can to keep you. And so that sucks, but it's kind of a reality. And sometimes money talks, right? Anyway, I ended up leaving that. But then again, last year, something similar happened. I got to this point where I could feel it. I was getting closer to what I'd felt in London. And so I actually went out to live on a farm for a month. And I actually moved onto a farm where I met Kim, because Kim lived on a farm up the road on a beautiful property. And so, like, you don't know that. And I was literally just going out there, had no idea about how to cultivate food, and getting my hands in the dirt like I would have when I was a kid, spending time in nature. And that we know, the science has come through about forest bathing and all that stuff, but we all know that when we're a kid, we love going outside, we love being in nature. And at some point we got sort of stuck in our boxes behind computers. So yeah, I just want to reinforce the fact that play is so, so, so important. And I'd love to know some of the things you recommend around play, Susie. Where do we go to with play for adults?
Well, I love to start outside. I have not had the chance to host in-person workshops and retreats thanks to COVID. I made a shift. Kim and I actually, when we first met, connected on the fact that I'd been doing body work and massage before I put full focus on my coaching. And so I love how interconnected our paths are, mysteriously, but there are no coincidences. Getting outside. One of the things that I've done, even in a virtual workshop, is with the lunch break, get outside, and on your walk, look for 3 things. Ask permission if you can bring it back, if it's still a leaf on the tree or a flower on the leaf, but look for 3 things. And it is a completely different way of being present, because usually we look at that walk as a chance to catch up on a podcast or, maybe a phone call. We're not present, right? We always think that we have to be multitasking. So to have that kind of focus being in nature is so powerful. I love to do things with our hands, just like you said, building something that kinesthetic, because especially now that everything is on a keyboard, we're not even writing. so much. But I have a cup full of colored pens. And so just grabbing a different color to take notes, I still take notes by hand, file folders everywhere. But it helps me to loosen up, right? It gets out of the box. Just like you said, Benny, that's what I talk with people all the time is so even if you're doing other kinds of work, carpentry or painting or sculpture, and if we like these things as a kid, I agree, like look for these opportunities to bring them back in at least some capacity, but we need to open up and get out of the box. We spend so much time curling in on ourselves, and reversing that is so important. I love to have people get together in groups or recruit friends so that you've got kind of a playmate or a co-conspirator, right? Accountability in that regard is really lovely, getting together for play dates. I've done virtual Zoom sessions where we get together and paint together, and we're all, move the camera and set up by the easel and maybe start with a template or image and then work from there, check in and compare notes. And sometimes we need that kind of frame to keep that space, because we tend to let that play, fun time, creativity get edged out when other commitments show up. I mean, I have to remind my clients, even exercise should be on your calendar so that people can't book a meeting and usurp your exercise date with yourself, right? And we tend to do that. We make accommodations by giving of our own selves because it's easier than asking other people to make accommodations for us. And those boundaries are so important, especially over the last year and a half, when so many of us now are working at home, in our office, or even in the living room. And it's so easy to let those boundaries get soft. So it's a worthwhile practice. But yeah, as many opportunities for play in whatever aspect that is. And some people feel really frustrated. I've talked with some creative folks, teachers, and coaches on my podcast, and I'm amazed at how many come from, have the story of being told they're not good at it. And again, as we've talked about before, people tend to coach or teach or heal in the areas in which they've had to heal themselves. And so I love that there's this movement that I've come across, so many creativity coaches that speak to that and are really giving us permission to let creativity be exactly what it is for you. It doesn't have to be painting, it could be knitting, but getting the hands involved, I think, is a great start.
I love that, actually. And in terms of worthy social media posts, I think encouraging by showing what it is that you're painting or you're sculpting or you're building, showing your play time is actually important for the rest of the world, your connections to see. I think if we celebrated that all of us were playful and lighthearted and more free and happier. And, it's back to that point about being happier. I think that we are going to get to this stage very soon, probably sooner than we imagine. This is the kind of premise of Positive Prime, is that if you allow yourself to be truly joyful and happy and cheerful and effervescent, success is yours. It's actually an ingredient to success. And I think that we're not going to move away just yet in Western society from wanting whatever we define success as. But if we actually ensure that people make the connection that being really fun and playful and joyful and lighthearted and, if that equals becoming more successful, we will allow ourselves more. We will create the opportunities that give ourselves the chance to be happier. Right? Really interesting. I noticed that when I realized, like Sean Acor's The Happiness Advantage teaches us, if I make happiness a priority, then I'll become more successful. And that is, in fact, exactly what has happened in my life over the last couple of years, right? Now, what I can assure people of, given that, we're here and we're in the Positive Prime sandbox, is that when you positively prime yourself, you're actually primed for happiness. It's easier, it's more elegant, it's more graceful, it's not so frustrating to find yourself in a much more playful state of being. It encourages you to be the type of person doing the type of things that's going to lead to happiness and fulfillment, and then therefore success. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's so, so true. And I wasn't aware as much until you introduced me to the work of Michelle Gielan and her inspiration coming from the news industry and the negativity that is perpetuated there. And then the alternative, when we choose to say, that's not where I'm going to start my day, that's not what I'm going to feed my mind with, and instead go to a tool like Positive Prime. That's why from the first time I heard about it, I was absolutely all in on it, because I just think it's absolutely revolutionary. And I know from my own experience, from the different kinds of work that I've done, that we get so busy, it's hard to integrate things, right? And so what we see the most of is just stays front of mind. And that's the news, the negativity, the gossip and the complaining. So when it's easy, when it can be this easy to make a shift like that, and to shift your reticular activating system to see more positive stories, to see more positive images, to notice more smiles, whatever that is, you're moving yourself in that other direction. You are taking the power to say, this is where my attention is going to be. And that's phenomenal. I think that's a game changer in so many different aspects.
Letting that sink in. Loving this conversation. It's I would call it a frothy conversation, Susie. Kim knows this, something that, raises you up, because really conversations are ways that we can prime ourselves for our day. That's why I love a good frothy morning conversation. It affects my day. As a coach, myself, Kim as a coach, yourself as a coach, I'm always fascinated. What do you do to positively prime your day?
Well, now that I have Positive Prime to get started, I think that's such a powerful square one. Just like I said, and the alternative is the news notification on my phone, right? And then it's the news, and then the email, and then the this, and I've gone down the wrong path. And I'm not going to say every day is a victory out the gate, because I have to ignore the notifications. And every time I make that choice for myself, I feel proud of myself for choosing, for shaping the rest of my day. I just interviewed Jana Danielson for an event that I have coming up, and I love how she talks about her in rituals being Lego blocks, right? And so if I don't get everything in order, if I don't follow the Positive Prime with a few minutes of meditation and then some exercise, and then whatever else comes next, maybe it's an abbreviated version of that, but I still feel like I've checked in and I've started from center, and then I can shape the rest of my day. And I still, as much as I say, this is successful, this is beneficial, do these practices, every day I come back to it. Every day, it's the choice. Which way am I going to start? Where am I putting my attention? And I notice it, not even all the way through the workday. My focus is off. If I've started just from distraction, I have trouble getting it back. So morning is definitely my kind of key feature. If I can get a hold of that, if I start off strong, then that lays the foundation for everything else. So I really encourage my clients to check in with themselves and see what that looks like, because, people say self-care is selfish. I don't like the bubble baths, whatever they say, I can't meditate for 40 minutes. They're so quick with the excuses. That's not going to work for me. I don't have time. I'm not that kind of person. So sometimes it's really a journey of exploring what nourishes you and restores you. Is it just walking outside with a cup of tea or coffee in the morning, barefoot, and getting grounded? That's a phenomenal self-care practice. Is it taking a walk after you eat lunch before you open your email inbox again? That's another powerful block that you can put in your day. And so all of those choices definitely add up. Another friend of mine gave me the image of every day is a fresh page in your book. So whatever you wrote yesterday, you've turned the page on that. Today is yours to write. And I think that can be a much more empowering way to look at it, because we tend to be really hard on ourselves. Well, I didn't get it done yesterday, and it's that much closer to the weekend, or I've got this many more things to do, so maybe tomorrow. Today's the page right here. So this is the best place to start.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Many, many years ago, we started to see a trend in the spa industry. People would actually go on healthy vacations or adventure vacations. It became a thing. And one of the encouragements, I suppose, that I make for the people who are my clients is that you take the spa or the retreat experience and you allow yourself to make a little bit of it every single day, or at least every single week. Like, you don't need to go away for a week to a retreat in order for you to actually have the benefits of retreating in your life. And having said that, when you do that, the interesting thing is that you're much more motivated and you desire even more to go and take that week in retreat. And so it's a very interesting play. It's almost like, oh, I like this so much, I think I'll have some more. I think when that starts to happen, you become the kind of person who very easily feels into, this is just not quite right. I do believe it's a journey though. So I want to encourage anybody who's watching or listening to just take the first step of those 1,000 steps. Susie, you said it's just the tiny little things. And you're right, it is. It's the tiny little things. It's just one tiny little thing today. Think about, what could you do? I ask myself questions. You know, we talk about sleep and taking a breath and pausing and thinking about how we respond. I've started to introduce better quality questions that I've actually crafted. So if I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety, I ask myself now, could this be excitement? And the funny thing is sometimes it's not anxiety, it's actually this effervescence because I'm anticipating something fabulous, right? Or I can literally try to actually reframe it. What could I be excited about? You know, rather than what am I anxious about? What could I be excited about? So I would like to, have in here that we actually encourage people just to ask, what could I do today that could give me the experience of feeling more playful? What could I do today that gives me the experience of feeling more playful? That means that you don't have to have this judginess around, am I playful? It's just like this hint.
Yeah, giving yourself permission. Isn't that so important? Permission, you got to give yourself permission. Susie, you're going to jump in there. I'd love to hear what you got to say.
Well, I think that's so empowering because I keep saying that, I'm on a mission. We do judge ourselves, and then that criticism starts to curb where we could go. So that's a beautiful frame. I really love that, Kim. Instead of saying, oh, I never make time for it, it's so hard, my schedule doesn't work, I'm so busy. What could I do today that could bring me some play? I have my clients do a things that make me happy list, and it's things that are 2 minutes long or a weekend long or a week vacation that you're dreaming of. And then if somebody cancels a meeting, you've got ideas right there. You can look and pull it off the wall and say, here's a 5-minute refresher. Here's something that makes me happy. So I love that. How can I bring in a little bit more play? Instead of coming from that place, we do that critical voice, starts to frame our perception. So I love that.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And so long as we don't then feel guilty when we haven't gone and taken up that dance lesson because we think, oh, that'd be playful, or when we feel even guiltier when we didn't get down on the floor and play with our grandchildren or our children or our nieces and nephews or whatever. So I think that it's important that we say that. A lot of people hear these kinds of conversations, decide for themselves, or go, oh, I think I might try that, but I don't really commit. And then they make themselves feel bad about themselves because they didn't actually apply, right? So for those of you who are out there who fall a little into that camp sometimes, be gentle, just be gentle on yourself. And how about you don't go, oh, I'm going to sign up for a dance class if you haven't done any exercise in the last year, right? Little bit by little bit, give yourself some advantages, give yourself some breaks, right? Benny, how would you help people do that? Then Susie, how do you help people do that? Feel less guilty about the fact that they're not doing all of these good, healthy things.
I think you hit on it perfectly when you talk about what to select as your first thing. So, you know, going to a dance class, if you've never done it, if you're not even going outside and walking, then I'll always go back to like, how can you find something that you're already doing in your day-to-day routine that you froth on, that you love? And if it's listening to music, then you can attach those songs that you love, especially if it's nostalgic and you used to walk when you're a teenager. So say you used to walk as a teenager. Okay, you probably did walk as a teenager, but maybe you went jogging. You don't necessarily need to go jogging, but listen to the music that you used to listen to then and take it outside. And that's where I would always start with people, because Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote this book called Flow, he's kind of the grandfather of flow. We're both familiar with that. Rest in peace. He just passed away. Absolute legend. He talked about a challenge skills ratio that we want to be adhering to if we want to find a flow state. And so it's basically what we want to do is we want to push ourselves far enough that it's just outside our comfort zone, but not so far that it pushes us into anxiety. Because a lot of the time that's the place that we're in at the moment. So we don't want anxiety plus anxiety, but we don't want to have it be boring. The other end of the scale is we don't want to do boring stuff. We want to do fun stuff. So add, if it's the music that gets you moving, then try music. If it's, you're going to go visit your friend at the coffee shop, which you know is only this far away and you can walk there, do that, because you've got the reward at the end of it. You get into sort of, I think it's BJ Fogg's work. Yeah, that would be my advice. Love to hear what Susie's got to say.
I think it's so helpful to find, the word is not accountability buddy, right? It's not about being accountable to yourself or your well-being or play, but maybe a co-conspirator, somebody who enjoys the same sort of a thing, somebody who's going to say, the day is gorgeous, let's fit in a walk, you know, who can take things on the fly, who can be spontaneous, and, you know, you can offer a suggestion, they can offer a suggestion. Sometimes we need a little inspiration. And maybe that's your partner. That's a beautiful relationship when that happens, but sometimes schedules don't align. And so I think it's really helpful to look for those opportunities, whether that's, I love the music inspiration too. I have a happy music playlist, you know, that I break up the workday and get up and move around and dance. And that shifts my energy immediately. It does wonders for my focus when I've got to come back and knock out some more, you know, writing. And so looking for those little things and adding those to your toolkit. I love to talk about the things that, because not every tool is great for every situation and we are all unique. So maybe if you used to love the Legos, you know, that now they have that little floral bouquet. It's a totally radical departure from the Legos that I grew up with. So the new advances that make you feel like a kid again, it's you 2.0, you know, those kind of opportunities can be fun too. And then really celebrate them, really be in the moment, instead of saying, oh, I better wrap this up, I've got a meeting coming up, or those two things I didn't get to, and looking for a way to be present and really take advantage of that. Experiences of awe and wonder stretch time. And so I've heard the theory being that when we're younger and so many things are new and curious and inspiring, that's why that time seems to stretch on. And as we get older, we don't have those kind of bookmarks to savor and enjoy. And so if we look for opportunities to create them, we can, you know, not only be more present and enjoy it, but also give ourselves more of those indicators, you know, more of those things that fuel us and light us up. So
the brain does need novelty, certainly, Susie, and I'm glad that the world's opening up a little bit more, because adults actually find that experience that they had as children, when they explore the world in places they haven't been to before, experiencing cultures that they haven't experienced before. And interestingly enough, there's actually some pretty great research being done in the fields of neuroscience and positive psychology around travel and how important it is to basically have these adventurous vacations in places that, you know, you're in a mode of discovery. You're in awe. You're like, wow, because you haven't seen that before. It's the same, I think, for people who really love going to different kinds of restaurants. It's like architecture on the plate. Often it's not necessarily that they just want fancy food. It's that it literally changes the way that our brains operate and the way that our hearts operate, because we're taken by surprise by something that's magnificent on a plate. And then the taste sensations or these explosions in our mouth give us this experience of novelty. It is essential for living life, really essential for living life. And so that's great. I've actually added a lot of personal photographs in customizing my Positive Prime super mixes. They're all around the kinds of places that I really want to go to. And at the moment, I have this insatiable appetite for like the cruise to Antarctica. And why not? Because that'll just completely refresh me and it'll inspire me to continue to lead, you know, Positive Prime and do other fantastic entrepreneurial things and live life. You know, this very precious, gorgeous experience that we all have.
Awesome. We should, you know, let's tie in the Positive Prime a little bit. I've got to drop something in because it only just happened. I was reviewing my photos from Positive Prime that are in my personal selection, and I put a druid circle in there, like a druidry stone circle from like the Celtic sort of traditions. And I went I went to visit a property I might be taking a lease on, and it's got a stone circle in the background, like in the backyard by the river. Like, what's the chances of that occurring? Like, how many backyards in Australia have a druidry stones? Yeah, I know, I'm aware, but I'm just saying, you know, sometimes even you get shocked. And another thing I was going to say about this, we've just been talking a little bit about stacking habits, and a lot of the Positive Prime crew are great at this as well. They'll watch their favorite sessions, and Jackie Simmons will ride her bike. Walter, we were just chatting with him. He's been doing some rehabilitation, and so now he's going to start doing his rehab while he does his Positive Prime. So we can take those things that we can take our Positive Prime sessions, which lift us up, and then practice things while we're doing it, and use that as kind of as an additional benefit. So I wanted to drop that in, and also I'd love to know from Susie, what would you say to someone who's not positively priming yet, not using Positive Prime?
I would say it's just, you have to suspend your disbelief, because it seems so simple. It seems like, how can this little thing do all of that you say? And I have to say, it was through the process of the certification program that I discovered how intentional every single aspect of it is, every single slide, every image. And that just kept blowing my mind a little wider open every time. And it took me a while to upload images into my session and start customizing. And then once I did, how much fun that was. And then I kept adding more and more. My gallery's not close to Kim's yet, but I might aspire to greatness and make my own super sessions. And you know, don't let time be an obstacle. Don't let, I'll get to it later, oh, I forgot. You know, look for ways. I love the stacking recommendation, you know, add it into whatever it is that works in your morning, but make that be the one piece that's non-negotiable. And keep being curious and checking out the different sessions. I'm still exploring new sessions because there are so many to choose from. And so it's new and novel. But then when I come back to one and I find the one with the bunny with the daisy hanging out of its mouth, it's like a lottery. Like, oh, there's that slide. It was in this session. I forgot which one it was in. You know, so it's kind of like a little seek and find too. It's almost gamification in and of itself. And you know, like we were saying before, the little things that we can keep coming back to can be so much more powerful than we expect that they can be. We think it has to be some radical commitment. And if that's something that you can integrate, that's phenomenal. But for most of us to make change happen, we have to build on those little victories and be proud of ourselves for saying. And that's why I love on the homepage when I can see how many days I've gotten my sessions in or how many hours I've been viewing sessions, you know, and I want to rack that up a little bit. I want to do better for myself. And so I love how that's just sitting there. It's just a part of it. You know, it's not very forward, but you can kind of challenge yourself to do better.
Love that. I do. I love that. Thank you, Susie. I actually wish everybody on the planet could do our certification program that really gets you to dive deep into the positive psychology and the neuroscience and the change management aspects of what it is that is a positive prime session, our formula inside our proprietary player, and why it is actually extraordinary, and why it's scientifically valid, and why when it was researched were we able to prove that you only need to watch a minimum of 3 minutes a day in order to have the effect last for 6 to 8 hours. There are lots of other things that can positively prime you. For those who are listening, eating apple pie, a sugar spike will do so. However, it's not exactly the healthy way to positively prime yourself, and the effects don't last 6 to 8 hours. They're very short-lived. And so you need to eat a lot of chocolate constantly, which is kind of not what you really want to be doing in order to have the same effect that a positive prime session will give you inside 3 minutes with an effect that lasts 6 to 8 hours. It was extraordinary.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Highly recommend too. And yeah, to wrap it up, I'd just like to ask you, what is, how can listeners get involved in your current life's work besides watching your session on Positive Prime? Because a lot of the positive primers will be listening and they'll be able to watch your session right now because it's live.
Talk about things that are new and novel. I can't get enough of it. Seeing it in reality is so exciting. I went back and forth with the team just a little bit and they're phenomenal. And seeing it all come together has just been so exciting. I do have my Happified podcast, and that comes out with a new episode every Tuesday. And I have so much fun having fantastic conversations with people who are bringing new ideas, you know, that might be new to you or something that you've heard of, but you haven't been able to get clear on, because I do think that overwhelm tends to hold us back. And so I love being able to shine a light on potential tools for the toolkit. That's really my mission with the podcast. And so beyond Happified, I am producing a summit, the Thriving Life Summit, which is coming up soon. And that just gives me a chance to go a little bit deeper and bring it together and make it more cohesive than the one-off episodes. And so I really am just passionate about opportunities where I can get the message out, because there's so much messaging in the world that is negative or that does take us down the wrong rabbit hole or make us think that there's not enough hope to go around. But when we look at the right things, when we put our attention not at what's outside of our control, but what we can do for ourselves and our family and our community, that's where we can really feel empowered to make change. And so that's my mission and my vision. And ultimately, someday I'd love to have a retreat center where I can bring the community together and help heal the planet. I'm passionate about regenerative farming too. So, you know, I've got ideas, and I'll keep on priming and moving myself in the right direction. But that's kind of the home of everything. Happified podcast is kind of the linchpin, and all pieces flow from that. So that's a great place to find me.
That is awesome. And so, Susie, before we leave, I can't help it, make sure that you add in a few more photographs of retreat centers such that you plant the seeds in your other than consciousness and you manifest that reality for you with greater ease and speed and joy, and allow that dream to become reality. I can tell you, many years ago, I found these fantastic photographs of a house in California. I think it was in a magazine called The Rob Report, and it had all of these curved walls, and I was just captivated by it. I now live in a house that is a Nautilus shell shape. It won an architecture award here in Australia decades ago. It's spectacular, and all of the walls are round. There's no coincidence to that, right? It is serendipity, it isn't synchronicity. But what I did was I planted the seeds in my other than consciousness about what it is that I wanted to experience in my life. I wouldn't call it goals or objectives. I think that that's all a little bit too rigid for me. It's like, what are the experiences I want to have in my life? That's what's on my bucket list. And all I need to do is allow life and the divine energy to guide me towards experiencing those things. But I must plant the seed in my other than consciousness. So I have to have photographs that represent what it is that I want or desire to experience, and have it in my positive prime sessions. So, what a way to come to your retreat center.
You'll be the first to know.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like we might have a positive prime retreat there.
Yeah. Satellite location.
Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Susie, before we wrap up to our listeners?
I think that I hope that this whole conversation has not been overwhelming, certainly not led anybody to feel guilty about, I could have done something earlier, I should do something differently, but simply to inspire people to look at today as a day where you can make a choice that's different, that's just for you, that brings a little more sunshine to your day, and to be present to how that makes you feel and how that energizes you, and really tune into ourselves, because we let so much input and information overwhelm that inner voice and guidance. And so when we get calm and centered, it can be pretty extraordinary that we know so much already. It's just a matter of learning how to tune back into that.
Woo! Let's go feel some joy. Mwah! Thank you, 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 Benny, for making this happen. Thank you, Susie, for being here and creating this with all of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our listeners and our viewers. Please share this. Just send it to somebody who you think it may be of benefit to. It could be, the little thing that just gives them a gift.
Beautiful. Beautiful way to finish. And thank you, Kim, as well. Cheers, Susie.